Well, we're fortunate we have an economic development expert with us. Bruce, tell me what your impression is about what the road is going to do for economic development in the southwest part of Indiana, as far as you can tell.
Well, it's hard to know with any specificity, but just like it was hard to predict what would happen as a transshipment point with Seymour before I-65 was developed. Clearly the southwest part and the south central part of Indiana are some of the poorest areas in the state. I think there's one critical jewel in that area, and that's Crane. Crane was initially situated to be inaccessible from lots of places, but as Crane has evolved over time, it is now a very high-tech, very sophisticated operation that is spinning off, obviously, military uses, but also private sector uses. And accessibility, especially accessibility by highways, is absolutely central both to the continuation of Crane and its competitive viability. The second part, of course, and Andy's right, the big benefits are both at the state level and the international level. NAFTA, with trade between Canada and Mexico, is absolutely central for growth in the country. Canada is by far Indiana's biggest trading partner. Mexico is actually, interestingly, not that far down the list either, and better communication will put, and better transportation will put Indiana in a better competitive situation as we move into the 21st century.
As we speak, of course, there's a meeting going on in Greene County talking about Section 4 from Crane to Bloomington that is being held by INDOT officials we asked to be here tonight and who declined because of this meeting. Mayor Hague, I want to ask you, as far as getting submissions to INDOT, which is what tonight's meeting is all about, you are in favor of the road. Have you found that your suggestions, being an obvious proponent of it, have been heard by INDOT, and have you been able to get Washington's side of this debate to them, and have they responded to you or to your city in any way?
Of course, the I-69 field office is in Washington, Indiana, so we're very close. I know the folks there by first name, they know me, and the information transmission is very smooth. And yes, they do listen. But understand, there's only so much money, there's only so much time. It's not an open checkbook. As Andy said, there's limits to what can be done, and the time frames have been accelerated tremendously. So, although we're not getting everything we'd like to have, we are having access to a major intercontinental highway, superhighway, and we are in the middle of it. So we feel as though it's a jewel for our area.
Andy, you mentioned earlier that some of this part of the road is not funded yet. The funding does not yet exist from the Bloomington to Indianapolis stretch of this, and there's been some concern also about the way that the road is being built from Evansville to Bloomington. People have said there could be this patchwork road of asphalt and concrete, and you imagine this zebra-striped type road every couple of miles looks a little different than the miles before it. How do you think that this is going to play out as we go forward and we try to find funding from Bloomington to Indianapolis? And is it even worth fighting? I mean, the road is being built at this point, which is a point that the INDOT folks have made recently. Is it more worth your time, for instance, to go to local contractors who might be bidding on this project to get the money from INDOT and from the stimulus funds that they have that are coming in to build the road, and saying, wait a minute, let's just make sure that the road as it is built is of the highest possible quality, and you get assurances from them, and then you at least get a road that is up to par and doesn't need to be refunded for fixing in the next couple of years?
Well, first of all, you elaborated pretty well on some of the problems with trying to build this road on the cheap right there, so I don't need to address that. But I would like to address a couple of points that have just been made that I can't let go by. One was, well, first of all, Section 4 is also not funded. You said from Bloomington north to Indy. But Section 4 from 231, US 231 to State Road 37 here in Monroe County is also not funded. That's an issue that's going to be coming up when our local MPO is faced with whether to put this in our TIP or not. When in our Transportation Improvement Program plan, which INDOT wants us to do, federal law requires that a stream of funding be identified to build that section. But I want to touch on a couple things Bruce said. You know, I've been looking at the data from the Indiana Business Research Center for about 20 years now, and it turns out that this idea that Southwest Indiana is sort of compared to other similar areas of the state, largely rural areas of the state, is somehow at economically lower standards it just turns out to be incorrect, and it's very easy to determine that by using the data from the Indiana Business Research Center. If you took about poverty statistics, wage gain, income increases, unemployment statistics, population growth, however you want to look at it, the Southwest Indiana counties, Pike, Davies, Gibson, all fare very well. Now, some of the ones in the central part, Crawford, Perry, which are significantly removed from this corridor, and which I'll note I-64 does serve an existing interstate, are some of the lowest, most economically struggling areas of the state. The other thing I wanted to mention real quick about what Bruce mentioned was Crane. You know, before we did our city council resolution opposing the construction of I-69, I wanted to be sure that we weren't doing anything that could put Crane in jeopardy. And I actually spoke to the BRAC, because this was at the time of the last round of base realignment and closure committee decisions. And I actually spoke to BRAC officials, and they made it very clear to me that the isolation of Crane is actually still Crane's most valuable, you know, the relative undisturbed, undeveloped area around it, its relative remote location is actually still its strongest asset. And that I was told very clearly that any advantage, transportation advantage of locating I-69 adjacent to Crane would be neutralized by its reduction in remoteness, in the likely encouragement for interstate type development along it.
Let me stop you for a second.
Okay.
I want to get a piece of tape in we have here. We have on tape Cher Goodwin, who's a spokeswoman for INDOT, and she, in an interview we did with her a couple of weeks ago, talked about the need for more transportation options in the southwest part of the state. So I wonder if we could see that real quick.
The I-69 corridor is important to INDOT because we need to strengthen and enhance the transportation system here in southwestern Indiana. Each corner of the state has its own direct route to Indianapolis, and we're missing that in southwestern Indiana. So it's vital that we do have that connection.
And we should point out that we also went to Crane and tried to talk to some people there, and we've talked to people surrounding the military installation there, and I keep hearing different things about what they say in terms of Crane's viability and safety with or without I-69, but I think the state is addressing a number of problems with the way the road goes through, and I wanted to ask Mayor Hague as well, and then I wanted to get a follow-up from Bruce on the economic angle. We've heard about a lot of people who have had to be displaced or potentially will be displaced as this road makes its way from Evansville to Bloomington to Indianapolis. And there has also been remediation that the state has said it's going to put back a number of acres of protected land and give people money to offset the loss of their land and their homes and whatnot. Do you see where you are in Washington and in Davies County that some of that money is going to go to these people who are being displaced, or is it going elsewhere outside of the road? I mean, so are people being compensated fairly, do you think, to build this road that you say is going to be a boon for your community?
Well, fair is in the eye of the beholder. You know, fair is where you show the cows and the pigs once a year, and you have a carnival ride. And bet. Now, is it equitable? Yes, I believe in speaking with several of the landowners, they feel as though it's being somewhat equitable, the offer that they have been made. Bet, of course, they would like to have more money. And I am for the highway. It's not going through my family farm. It's not going through my family home. It's not splitting up where I live. It's not dramatically impacting my life as a negative. So bet the folks that is being impacted, they are concerned about the compensation. I have a stepsister that is, she has a home, and next door to her home they have the shop. The shop is going to be torn down, and you could throw a baseball into the middle, the median of the highway from her front porch. Now that is going to directly impact the value of her home. So they knew that when they bought the land, but they thought that was going to be 20 years down the road. Now, whenever the whole change, the expedited timetable, it really changes things.
Let's talk about, Bruce, the idea of fairness and about the idea of adding value through economic development with the road versus losing the value of a home or a homestead that is being moved or replaced as the road goes through different places. How, as an economist, do you measure fairness in this way, or is it even possible to decide how you measure one side versus the other and you come up with a number that is what the road is going to do positively or negatively?
That's sort of a critical question, and you know, the government is in there buying land at presumably fair market value and can take it by eminent domain, but its basic idea is to negotiate a fair price. There's no question that there's the intrinsic value of the land, but there's also the memories, the feelings there that you won't be well compensated for. But on the other hand, there were benefits that aren't being compensated for as well. I mean, one thing we haven't talked about is the safety angle. You know, there are maybe 4 or 5 ways from Bloomington to go from Bloomington to Evansville, each one actually a relatively dangerous route involving lots of 2-lane roads and curves and stop lines. No one sort of in there sort of valuing the value of lives and injuries that are going to be reduced by having clearly a safer way to go, well, from Indianapolis all the way down to Evansville.
Let me stop you there for a second.